Is it me to read the thing? I can't remember.
Yep, you're starting this one.
Welcome back to the Measuring Up podcast, episode 17. The UK's first and, as far as we know, only commercial joinery podcast. I'm Andy MacLellan and I run a joinery and cabinet making business up in Newcastle upon Tyne, and I also run the Gosforth Handyman YouTube channel.
And I'm Peter Millard, and as well as running a virtual 10-minute workshop on YouTube, I also run a very much real-life carpentry and cabinet making business here in the garden spot of West London. Now, every couple of weeks we get together in our internet cafe and we have a chat about, well, whatever takes our fancy, or whatever's been suggested by you, our fantastic listeners, or indeed whatever's come in through social or email. And we've got a lot to discuss this week.
Oh, my word.
We've had a huge flood of communications from you guys, and thank you so much for getting in touch. The best way to get in touch with us, of course, is through the show email address, which is contact@measuringuppodcast.com. That'll always reach us, or indeed through our social sites. Not really on Facebook, but on Twitter we are Measuring Up PC, or Instagram, Measuring Up Podcast. So best way to reach us all. But before we get into all that feedback stuff, how have you been, Andy?
I've been not too bad. I think I'm a bit coldy today, so ignore kind of if I'm sounding a bit throaty. But it's it's like kids back at school for the winter term, yes. And suddenly the germ magnets just start spreading the colds around.
They do. They do.
And but I'm fine. It doesn't stop anything, but it just makes me sound like the guy off the Tunes advert.
Before or after?
Well, maybe a bit both. And what about yourself?
All right, thank you. Yeah, keeping busy, having fun. Lots going on. I think I said last time that people seem to have just realised that Christmas is but around the corner, and suddenly everything needs doing before Christmas. So it's getting a bit full on frantic.
It's that time of year.
It's that time of year, and the days are getting shorter, and yet they need to be longer. There's just so much to do. Plus, of course, all the YouTube stuff. It's hard to fit it all in sometimes. I'm getting really bad, actually, and very lax, and I'll apologise to everybody here, as I will on the YouTube channel as well, about responding to messages, emails, comments generally. I was chatting the other day with someone, and we were saying that YouTube comments are fine in that you get a comment in and you can reply to it. But if somebody replies to that, you get a notification about it, but you have no idea where it is. It's really hard to keep up with things. And again, throw in Patreon and messages through Instagram or Twitter, and it gets difficult. I think we chatted last time about there comes a point where you have to start sort of stepping back from it, and I'm just struggling to keep up with all that. Plus, work stuff. The paying work, the paying customers tend to appreciate a response occasionally as well. So
that's got to take priority, really, hasn't it? So.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, that's what I didn't get. I didn't get a drink of water.
Do you want to do that now?
Just give us 2 seconds.
Yep.
2 seconds.
Andy has got
Hold on, I can't hear you.
A light bulb with 3 lights in it. I think it's one of those fancy photo lights.
Right, I can hear you.
So is that like a photo lamp thing behind you with three lights in it?
It is, yeah. Can you see it? Let's see, where are you?
Yeah, just about.
In the in my studio room, because I do the odd bit of recording in here, mainly for the other channels, and I've got a couple of those, and I did have the big diffusers on them, but the diffusers just take up so much room that I'm sacrificing the softness of the light to have a little bit more space, and I'm surviving with them without diffusers, and it's fine for the sort of stuff I do.
Yeah.
At least I've got the light.
And who doesn't like the rabbit in the headlights look,
Well, exactly. Especially when it like glimmeringly shines off the top of my head. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, I just couldn't move in this room for diffusers on lights, so they've had to go. It's a bit of an experiment. We'll see how long it lasts. But
yeah. The diffusers are tricky. I quite like the LEDs, but they're The photo LEDs are quite expensive because they can shift colour. You can change the colour balance of them, which is quite clever. And also the dimmable ones. I've got a couple of those that they're around 20 quid. They're not too bad, but yeah, you know, they're a bit direct sometimes. You need to soften them down a little bit. The soft boxes, the diffusers are really good, but they do take up a lot of space.
Yeah, they do. They're a bit of a pain. And I had one in the workshop. In fact, that is the one out the workshop. But now that I'm trying to get the lights upgraded in the workshop, I thought, well, I might as well get that one out of there, because there's no point in having... The whole point of what I'm doing is to have one temperature of lights throughout. And so I thought, well, that might as well come out. And it gives us an extra light in the studio room as well. So
yeah, sure.
I'll tell you what I'd like to get is an external monitor for my camera.
Eyesight fading, is it, by any chance?
Well, that, and
Mine is.
I mean, yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
no.
I'm short-sighted anyway, so when I'm standing away from the camera, doing a piece to camera, I cannot see. I can barely see the screen, never mind whether or not I'm in focus.
Yeah.
But even just for focusing, at the moment, what I have to do is kind of... I use a focusing stick, which so I zoom in on the end of the focusing stick and then lock the focus in. But even that, it's difficult to see if it's properly in focus because the screen on the camera is just so small. Do you know what I mean? And
I've got to say, I've gone back to using autofocus, and it's actually working very well.
is it all right?
Yeah.
I've had too many autofocus disasters where...
Well, I've had some manual focus disasters as well. I've had to reshoot stuff because I've just got the focus wrong.
Right.
Because one of the headaches is, of course, your arms are, despite having the most ridiculously long arms in the world, they're just not long enough to be able to focus properly.
As I say, what I do, I've got a stick with a nail on the end.
Yeah.
And I stand that distance away from the camera. So I basically hold the stick up to the camera and line the nail up with my eye, and then I focus on the nail on the end. So as long as my head is where that stick was, which it more or less is.
Yeah, I do the similar sort of thing. I just put a stand-in shot, and focus on that. But again, you don't need to be far away one side or the other to lose focus on that, and you just sit back down in the wrong place or whatever else. And I found that the autofocus generally works extremely well. I had a lot of problems when I first had the camera, but these days it seems to be pretty good.
Yeah, as I say, I've had too many where the autofocus decides to focus on something else.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
So the background is perfectly sharp and there's this fuzzy amorphous blob in the foreground that's talking. The sound's really good, but the pictures are rubbish.
And if it's just a relatively short piece, it's not the end of the world. But I've had ones, especially where I've been doing like my tax videos and stuff like that, where it's been like a great big, long, like 20-minute run. And then you go back and then you check it and it's like, oh, the whole thing is out of focus and you have to redo the whole thing. And it's just like, oh, I don't believe it. It'll be that one perfect shot as well. You've said everything right.
Of course. And the one perfect take where you do everything just right and you don't stumble over your words or say things wrong and it just sort of falls apart.
Yes.
I mean, I've got to say, I think mine's got some kind of facial recognition in it so that it sort of latches onto a face and focuses on that. Certainly there's a little yellow or green box on the screen that sort of follows my head around, so it's either a target or it is actually latching on focus-wise, and that does seem to work pretty well.
I'll tell you one thing, I was watching one of your videos just yesterday. I think it was the one about the thumbnail is like a tip of your sprayer.
Oh, yeah.
It's not your last video, but the one before, I think, and it was... you were talking about clearing out the tip of the spray gun,
right,
and your Grackle being going back for repair and all that.
Yeah,
and you did a piece to camera in that just using your phone.
Yeah,
did you? Is that the picture quality was amazing.
I know, it's just incredible.
The audio quality was amazing as well. I mean, it was to the point where it was like, okay, you're doing that to your phone, but do you have a separate mic were you using? A lav mic? Was that just the phone mic?
That's just the phone mic.
It sounded perfect.
If you keep it close enough to you, so for vlogging, that sort of thing, it's absolutely fantastic.
Is that on the iPhone X, is it? Or?
Yeah, it's an iPhone XS. Yeah. I've used them before and they've been okay, but in this one, it's particularly good. I'm going to do a Wednesday workshop on it, do a ordinary bloke's take on the XS to see if it's genuinely worth the money.
Is it a 10 or an X then? Because
they say 10.
Right, because I know when it first came out, everyone was like, "Oh, this is the new iPhone X," and then
X. Yeah, well,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why they go with the Roman numerals. It's a bit kind of but yeah, it's supposed to be 10 because XS would be XS, wouldn't it?
True. Yes. So it's a 10S.
Yeah. So it's the 10S, and it's very, very good. I've got to say, it is. They are ridiculously expensive. But I'd say it's almost worth paying that for the camera.
So
alone,
that in that video, you were talking about your air quality monitor, and I was going to mention on today's show my air quality monitor's packed in.
So because mine has,
exactly the same problem as yours.
Really, it's just sky high readings.
Just sky high readings, even when.
Interesting.
And I thought it was just me, and I was keeping the air filter running, and I thought, is the air filter like chucking particles back out into the room? Like, why is because it was constantly sitting at about 3,000, and my workshop's normally about 400 or something like that.
Baseline.
And it was constant. I'd walk into the room, and it's like it can't just be the dust that's being raised up from me walking into the room. So I took it out of the workshop and I set it up in the house in a normal room in the house, and it was still showing like 3,000 odd minimum reading.
That's interesting.
And it's only 6 months old, and I got in touch with the company I bought it off, and I said, look, I mean, it's only 6 months old, this, and I'm recommending this product to people. And is there anything that you can do here? Because, I mean, I assumed it would come with some sort of 1 year warranty or something like that. And they just said, oh, no, since it's over 6 months old, because it was like 6 months and 3 days old or something, we can't do anything. And I said, well, are you sure? Because if you're willing to sort this out, then I'll keep it as a product on my product list and stuff. Yeah. But I can't recommend it if it's going to break after 6 months. And they just said, no, maybe you can find a technician locally who can fix it for you. And it's like, oh, well, screw you then. So
that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned that you'd bought another one. Did you get another one the same?
Yeah, I bought the same one again. It's fine.
I would highly recommend returning it because, as I say, mine lasted 6 months. Exactly the same problem as yours.
Interesting. I would have sworn that it was because it was exposed to very high levels of paint dust and whatever else.
I saw you saying that on your video, and I would have assumed the same, that it was paint dust, but my workshops just had normal MDF dust, nothing special.
You can just buy the sensor. I bought another one because, I wanted one, and you can actually just buy the sensor. It's about 15 quid.
Right.
And I'm going to try changing that. No, I've already taken it back across the road. So I'll just change the sensor as an experiment.
I might give that a try.
But I'll mention that. I didn't know. That's interesting. I might have to stop recommending that then.
Yeah, which is annoying because it did the job really well.
Yeah.
But there's obviously, and as I say, mine hasn't been subject to any paint dust.
No paint dust or anything.
It's just pure normal workshop dust. And
one thing I will say is it is a real eye. I don't know if you did this before, but if you do take it into your house, it is a real eye opener what the residual dust levels are.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it shouldn't be 3,000.
No. But certainly my home, which is non-smoking, child and pet free, the residual dust levels here were higher than the baseline in the workshop, which is interesting.
That's very interesting, and I wonder if that's because you've got the air filter in the workshop now. Then
this was way before the air filter.
This was before.
Oh well, I'll keep an eye on that certainly. And
yeah, it's a pain because I mean I had a look at like other ones, and there's like an official one made by Fluke, and that's about £3,000 or something.
Yeah. Oh well, that's why I bought this one because they're about they're a few £100 to buy proper one, if you like, one that will record over a period of time. Have you tried using your extremely quiet compressor to blow some air through it? Because it's got a little fan in it that sucks the air.
Yeah, no, I have, and I always used to keep it pretty clean anyway, so I wouldn't let dust build up on top of it and things. Yeah. I would always every couple of days just give it a gentle blow just to keep the area
there's your problem right there, sir.
I know, I've looked after it too well.
Yes, you've been forcing compressed air into it.
Yes.
No, that's a drag. I'll keep an eye on mine then, because I would have sworn that. I mean, mine only happened directly after I'd been doing that heavy spraying with the little HVLP, and there was a lot of paint in the air. There was a lot of overspray. So I'll keep an eye on the new one then, because they're reasonably priced, but if you have to change them every 6 months, it's slightly self-defeating, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll become quite expensive. So, what should we have a look at? Some of the follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, we got some great follow-up this week from a variety of people. I don't know if everybody has given their permission to use their names, so we'll just refer to them by first names for now. But we got a lot of follow-up on the on the qualifications side of things when we talked about what does an apprenticeship mean, what does a qualified joiner mean. Again, one of the things that really comes up is how much it varies in different parts of the country. We had a Robert from up in Scotland who said he's very much a modern apprenticeship, 4 years long, 2 years of college and 2 years on site, gaining the necessary job site experience. The adult apprenticeship is only the 2 years college portion of the apprentice process, which is interesting. He says when he was at college, he attended 2 weeks at college and 2 weeks at work. So it's sort of half on, half off for the period. And he goes on to say that even the problem is, even when you become qualified, you've still got to do 6 months work as a placement before you can call yourself qualified. So it's like, even once you're qualified, you got to serve your time for 6 months as a junior. So somebody gets cheap labour out of you, which is a little bit cruel. He says he's now a time served unqualified carpenter joiner, but it probably doesn't. He does say it doesn't make him a better tradesman than you or I. He says he would feel intimidated to work beside either of us. I don't think you would, to be honest. But anyway, but he says we both have something over him that you can't get from a college certificate, which is experience. And that's the difference. He also said that on his skills test, there was a female candidate and she passed with flying colours and is now set up as her own business. So good for her.
Which is fantastic. And we've got to see more of that. And but I'm still completely baffled by what an apprenticeship is. And I've read all of the comments, or most of the comments coming in. And is the apprenticeship just the bit of work experience after college, or is the apprenticeship the stuff you do at college? Because I was looking at, because from this note that Robert sent, and for example, he said the adult apprentice is only the 2-year college portion of the apprentice process, but I thought the apprenticeship is the 6-month bit that he's doing afterwards. I thought an apprenticeship is the bit that you do almost like a work placement. It's like an extended work placement. You've got the college bit,
yeah,
and that kind of teaches you everything you need to know.
In theory.
This is just my understanding. But you've got the college bit, which is like your theoretical knowledge, and then you've got your on-site stuff, which is your more of your practical building up experience. And it's the on-site stuff that I thought that bit is the apprenticeship.
Okay.
Because everything I've read, for example, you can go on to these training websites and you can pay like $3,000 or well, here's a one here, $1,500, and it gets you an NVQ in carpentry. I'm not sure what level, but There is no timescale on achieving a carpentry NVQ.
Okay.
If your line of work allows, NVQs can be achieved in a relatively short space of time. However, if the carpentry work you're doing is restricted or repetitive, the NVQ process can take longer because the opportunity to meet all of the requirements of the required NVQ units will not be available to you. And then once you've... I don't know. I don't get it. And then it's saying on another section, it says, NVQs are a declaration of competence and as such cannot be achieved in a simulated environment like a training centre. All we can do here is prepare you for the process, and we do this very well. So I think what they're saying, and then it says at the end of the course, you will be, they will register you as someone who is working towards achieving an NVQ level 2 in carpentry. And this course, this is another one, this is $4,000 for this course.
Wow.
And it's a 10-week, is it NVQ level 2? I'm not sure. Yeah, 10-week City and Guilds NVQ level 2 in carpentry and joinery. And it's £4,000. And at the end of the course, they will register you as someone who is working towards achieving an NVQ level 2.
So what do you need to do to achieve it then?
So I don't get it. I know that you've got to do an apprenticeship afterwards, but I can't find anything that tells you how long that apprenticeship has to be and what you have to do. I mean, could it literally be that you're going to make cups of tea on a building site for 5 years?
Yeah.
And then you get a tick in the box to say you've done your apprenticeship. I mean, surely that's going to be so varied depending on your employer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Robert, who we quoted earlier on, did say that he now runs his own sort of joinery business, and he spent his time making roofs and doors and windows and all kinds of site joinery. So very interesting, but not actually what he does now.
Yeah, because it's going to be 100% dependent on the company that you happen to get the apprenticeship with.
Yes,
and I'm assuming you can't be too picky about that because you get.
I'd imagine not. Yeah.
At the point that you leave college, you're going to have like billions of people applying for apprenticeships at the same time. So you're going to have to pretty much take what you're given, I'm assuming. And
I would assume so.
Or you hang around and wait until not everyone's applying for an apprenticeship at the same time. But I'm assuming that like other college courses, they all end around June. And then you're going to have this like glut of people applying for apprenticeships. And then, I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if they actually, because they're private courses, if you like, I'm not sure they work to an academic year like that. I just don't know, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. No, if you do, obviously, like the fast track ones, like your 10-week courses and stuff, then but then you've got to pay a lot more for it. But if you just go to a normal college, like if I went to Newcastle College, for example, and said I want to do a joinery qualification, I'm assuming I would just go on a normal September intake for the courses. I might be wrong, but that's my assumption.
I don't know. We did hear also from Jim. I know Jim actually. I know him through the Facebook group, Woodworking UK. He's quite active on there, and he said he's actually in his mid-40s, and he's just recently gone back to college full-time as a mature student. He says he's oldest by at least 25 years on the course. It's a level 2 Sitting Guilds bench joinery course, but he's the only one doing bench joinery, as the others are all doing site joinery. And he did say what we were saying in the episodes were 15 and 16 were quite correct. He's full-time and has to attend 6 hours on a Monday and Tuesday and 2 hours Thursday and Friday mornings. So 16 hours in total per week is full-time. And he says he generally only goes Mondays and Tuesdays so as he can work on the rest of the week trying to build up his new business. 12 students in his group, all around 19, but joined by 2 other classes of younger students. So potentially 36 young adults in a relatively small space, and it's fairly chaotic. It sounds like the the lecturer, 2 lecturers, and sometimes a technician are more like referees than actually teaching anything.
But this is the thing, and I would love to know from Jim, because Jim will be able to tell us this. Does he still have to do an apprenticeship at the end of this? Does he have to go and do work on site for a company? Because from everything I'm reading about NVQs, as I say, NVQs are a declaration of competence and as such cannot be achieved in a simulated environment like a training centre. So my understanding is the final tick in the box for getting that NVQ is to work for a company.
To work as an apprentice for some company, yeah.
And that's the bit that I don't get. And then I'm on another website here that says, how long do apprenticeships last? An intermediate level 2 apprenticeship usually takes 12 to 18 months. So how come there's other people here saying that they take 5 years or 4 years or 2 years? Either way, none of them add up to what is on.
No.
And this is on another, well, it's another random website selling joinery apprenticeships. So I don't get it. There must be people out there who can. Maybe there is just no black and white answer to this, but
yeah, maybe Jim can get back to us and perhaps clarify that. And obviously, if you do want to get hold of us, then the email address to reach us on is contact@measuringuppodcast.com. Jim does go on to say that all he has to do for the course is to build a small door and staircase using hand-cut joints, because that'll come in handy. The only theory lessons that he needs to complete are in health and safety and building theory, both of which he says are very basic. There's nothing on marketing, technology, SketchUp or similar, and no help on how to start out on your own, as most will go on to apprenticeships or work for small firms. That's interesting. So yes, it does sound like the apprenticeship is in addition to doing 12 months to get your level 2 NVQ, Sitting Girls.
I mean, the fact that they're not even teaching basic SketchUp skills, or I mean, it should be Fusion 360 or something like that. SketchUp or Fusion 360, they should at least be touching on it. I mean, they don't have to go into it in detail.
Well, the reason for that is almost certainly that the college lecturers don't know how.
Yeah.
But you get taught what they know, hopefully.
It's a tool of the trade.
And you don't get taught what they don't know. Much like the reason we learned French in school is because that's what they could teach. It's because they didn't have German or Chinese teachers.
Utterly perplexing.
It is baffling.
I'm no further forward now. So we are now 3 episodes into talking about this, and I am no further forwards. If anything, I'm more confused than when we first started talking about it.
Well, Jim goes on to say that the reason he decided to do this is because he wanted to fill the gaps in his self-taught learning via enthusiastic DIY and YouTube channels like ours, but mainly for the confidence in building up his own abilities. Says without a generous voluntary redundancy package from where he was previously, he wouldn't have been able to pay for the course and to support himself during it. He does say the course costs £1,400 for the year, so that's not something a lot of people could just go out and pay for when you factor in the loss of income for a year as well. He says he's learned as much, if not more, by self-teaching and following the likes of ourselves on YouTube. So, interesting.
It really sounds to me like the whole system needs a giant shake-up. It sounds very much like it's been running in the same way for the last 50 years and no one's thought to change it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I had a young woman knock on my door the other day because she was doing some casual work in one of the other offices. And she says she's a qualified bench joiner looking for work. So somebody had mentioned that I did woodworky type stuff. She came down and seemed sort of crestfallen by the fact that there were, how small the workshop was, and the fact that I didn't do any hand tool work. The sort of stuff I do is all wood machinery. Let's be blunt. It's domino joints and stuff made out of MDF. And we had a bit of chat back and forth. And I don't know. I shot her the links to the podcast episodes where we talked about this. But the thing she said, she did a 6-month joinery apprenticeship, and I'm quoting here, knows all the joints. So there we are. That's confidence building, isn't it? I don't know. I'd like to have a chat with her a bit in a bit more detail, and maybe we can get her on to give us at some future point to give us a bit more detail on the sort of thing that she did and the sort of thing that she expects to do. But having done 6 months as a 6-month course as a bench joiner, I'm not sure what you come away with in terms of trying to find work afterwards.
And whether or not you can make those sort of joints in a commercial environment as well. Because if you've been doing those joints and you only know how to do them by hand, well, that
you're in for a
big shock.
Sharp shock. Yeah.
Because if you try and do a project where you're going to be hand cutting all of your joints.
Go on, tell me, when was the last time you hand cut a mortise and tenon or a dovetail?
Well, it would have been on a project for a present for my wife, which is going to be a video on my channel at some point. Whoa, it's been sitting there. It's been waiting to get edited for best part of 7 or 8 months.
So she does actually have the gift now. You know,
yes,
you're not making her wait.
It. No, I should have done, but
I've got your Christmas present, but it's going to be next year.
Yeah. So, and I thought on that it would be nice, but even then, not all of it's hand cut. The ones that I could easily do, like shoulder cuts on tenons and stuff like that, that I can easily do on the table saw with a jig and stuff. There's no point in doing it by hand. Why would you? But when I can do a more accurate and cleaner and much, 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 much faster joint on the table saw, it's just like, why would you? And but yeah, and the only reason I did that is because to do the odd joint by hand looks good on camera, and it makes it a bit more interesting than just constantly running bits of wood through a table saw.
Yeah.
So I did the odd bit of like knocking out mortises for through tenons and things, and I did the odd bit of knocking those out by hand. So you'll see my really poor hand joinery skills and what happens when I'm put behind a chisel
at some future time.
I really, you know what it is? I've got a handful of videos that have been sitting there one of them's been sitting there for nearly 2 years, and I still haven't got round to editing it, and it always just falls to the bottom of the queue.
Is it time sensitive at all, or is it?
No, and that's why, because they're not time sensitive in any way. So. I mean, they will become time sensitive if chisels go obsolete by the time I get round to editing this video.
Self-sharpening chisels, that's what we mean.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I've had projects where I've had to do half-blind bridle joints on projects for customers, but they've all been done. I mean, if you've got to make 100 half-blind bridle joints, you can't be doing that by hand. It's going to take you. How long is it going to take you to do one joint accurately? And then
I wouldn't start from here. No.
Yeah.
no.
So
no. Well, again, it's not part of our. Obviously, there are people who do that. A friend of the show, Joey Chalk, King Goes Timber Works, does those fairly routinely on some of the nicer sort of walnut dresses and things that he makes. But I don't know how much of his routine business that is a significant part of. I can honestly say I haven't hand cut a dovetail since I was at school, and I think I might. Well, I certainly haven't hand cut a mortise and tenon since I bought the domino.
Yeah, it's just kind of, in a commercial environment, it's just pointless.
It's a different game. Yeah, it's not. Why would you put hand cut mortise and tenons in an MDF? Why, that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, commercial world of joinery's very, very different to hand-cut joints and all that sort of thing. I mean, I would love to think that at college you're getting shown how to use dovetailing jigs.
Yeah, don't know.
Maybe that's a thing. I mean, I've never used a dovetailing jig. I don't own one.
No, me neither.
That would be an interesting thing to know how to do, because that could genuinely be very useful on projects. But, yeah. But it's one of those things where if you're getting called... And maybe I would like eventually to progress to doing that sort of work, your finer joinery projects and the sort of thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Projects that you can sell for a lot of money. That, I don't know. I suppose we've got a bit of an advantage from the fact that we do the YouTube and the podcast and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
But maybe people will just get nervous if we made something out of oak not MDF. I'd be like, well, you obviously don't know what you're doing with this. There's not a single video about it on your YouTube.
True. Yeah, interesting. So you had a good video out in the week where you talked a little bit about pricing and stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I quite enjoyed making that video. That's been one of the. This is another video that it's knocked everything else off the schedule. Someone happened to drop me a tweet saying, would I recommend setting up a handyman business at the minute, and how do you know how much to charge? And I replied to them on Twitter.
The answer is don't ask us.
Yeah. And I replied to them on Twitter, and as I was kind of putting the reply together, I realised this would make quite an interesting video, and it is something I've kind of considered making before, but I think this just kind of brought it fresh to the front of my mind. The video ended up being over half an hour long, so I've had to split it into two halves, and the second half will be out by now, but in our time, it doesn't come out till this Saturday. And the first part, I've had a bit of a chat about saying, yes, I think it's a great time because I constantly get asked still to do handyman type work.
Yeah.
And, but you need to make sure you're not undercharging. And at the end of the day, no one's going to tell you what you should charge. And I think that works against this country in a lot of ways. We seem to be very protective over how much we charge people and things. And I don't think that's leads to a positive situation, because I think that's why you end up in a situation where you've got fly-by-night people going in at charging £100 a day, £50, stuff that you can't possibly make a living off. But then on the flip side, you've got people going out and charging crazy amounts of money because they can get away with it, because the market is in that kind of state where no one knows what you should be charging, including the people doing the work and the people paying for the work to be done. No one has a clue what.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a lot of pushback when, I think we mentioned this last time, I just done my tools for shelves, where I tried to get the price of the tools out of a commercial job, and that set of shelves I charged £745 for it, and I was castigated in the comments by a number of people. In fact, there's a sort of a follow-on from that today, where I go through in a video that is out today, but will have been out a couple of weeks ago in real time, where I take another commercial, one of those MDF tables that I make, and I go through it, and it was just as I was tidying up, I thought, oh, actually, this is interesting, because I had all the tools just dumped on the bench that I'd used for this. Let's go through them and see what they cost. And it was thousands and thousands of pounds worth of tools used to make a table that was only going to bring in a fraction of that in terms of revenue. So people going out charging £100 a day or whatever else are just not being realistic. I mean, just for balance, I'm going out next week with my wife and my daughter to a live music show, and the tickets are, I think it was £70 a piece. Maybe, it might have been 100. I'm not actually sure. I paid for it a while back. That's what it costs to go out and see a live show. That's one performance. And we're way up in the gods, looking down on the stage from above. We had a quick look earlier on. Me and my wife both quite like Muse as a band. They're playing next year, so May 2019, at London Arena. And again, if you want tickets way, way up high with a partial view of the stage, they're £100 each. If you want down, not in the mosh pit, but down, with a good view, they start at £1,300. Now, put your alcove unit in perspective for a second. That's something that you're going to make and build and fit, and is going to last a hell of a lot longer than one evening's performance. We seem to be in an odd situation as well as carpenters and cabinet makers, where we seem to want to compete with each other to see who can do the cheapest price. We've mentioned it before, I know, the old Screwfix forums. Scrifix is a UK retailer, and they had a forum before we had stuff like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and whatever. And guys on there would constantly try and outcompete each other to see who could work cheaper. We had guys on there who were claiming they could hang a door for 15 quid and were proud of that. What? Why? Why would you be proud of that? That seems like madness.
And this is kind of a reason that I touched on the end of the first video. The whole work out a plan for what is a sustained rate of work. Because I think you've got a lot of youngsters who are coming straight from college and they're going straight on the sites and they're seeing people, you know, and they're working ridiculously quickly. Because they're getting pushed to do so, especially on bigger building sites where they're getting paid, you know, per job.
Yeah, piecework.
And they're getting pressurized from the companies that they're working for to get the job done. I mean, I was watching quite an interesting video. I might include a link to it on dry lining and dot and dab dry lining. It's a company that does dry lining, and they happen to put a video up on YouTube of them dry lining a room. They had, I mean, how long would that take you to dry line a room, you know, with dot and dab, including getting all...
Dot and dab, I've done it, and it takes me a lot. Dot and dab I quite enjoyed, actually. It's quite good fun, but getting a length of 4x2 and sort of whacking that sheet of drywall of plasterboarding is to...
I mean, for the...
but yeah, I'm not fast.
For the best will in the world, if I was to have a stab at that, and it would be a right mess, it would take us a couple of days, I would have thought, to dry line a room. This guy, and the video, it's had like 2.3 million views. It's obviously gone viral. None of the other videos have had this many views. But as I say, I'll include a link to it. And this guy dry lines a room in an hour.
Gee whiz.
And I mean, the video is obviously cut, and it's only like a 30-minute video or something, but it's not cut that much.
Wow.
And it's like, wow. And to be fair, he seems to do a pretty good job. He's actually using a square. He's actually using a level, and it looks like a good job, and it's like, wow. But you can't keep that rate of production up for your whole life, because you are going to slow down.
Yes, you made some very good points in your video, and I'll just recap a couple of them. One was the distinction between a handyman and an odd job man. That distinction down here is lost by and large. People don't understand that. A handyman being a multi-skilled person, so you can do a little bit of everything to a decent standard. Whereas an odd job man is somebody you call to do garden clearances, or, you know, maybe put a new door handle on or whatever else. A very, very important distinction. And the other thing is, you mentioned about costing and pricing. You know, if you've got 20,000, if you want to earn £30,000 a year, and it's not a lot, and your overheads are 20,000, well, that's 50 grand a year. You've got to find that's £200 a day for every working day of the week, and you're not going to work every day of the week. You're not. If you're working, let's say you can get 4 billable days in a week, and that's a lot. To be honest, I work on less than that. I project. I forecast on less than that. Then suddenly you've got to be charging 250 quid a day. That's a realistic set of figures. Easy to be a busy fool, I think. You also mentioned as well the mum's net type forums and whatever, and I that really struck a chord with me, because I'm on this next door sort of round robin email list sort of group thing, and I actually stuck this on Twitter earlier in the year. It was a post from somebody looking for a handyman. Handyman, looking for a competent handyman. Please, no builders, I can't afford you. Sad face. Here we go. Painting, tiling, wood filling, fit new sink and unit, replace some laminate flooring and some little bits and bobs, all needing done before November. And this was posted in September sometime. So a couple of months. References would be helpful too. Now, you want that for the less than the price of a builder, as I put on Twitter, and the moon, and stick as well while you're at it.
I get so wound up by these sort of posts that people put out there. And the one that I mentioned on the video, and I'd only found it by chance. I didn't, that was kind of top of the list of Google searches, and it was the first one I clicked on for handyman rates, handyman carpenter rates or whatever. I can't remember what I searched for. But I didn't do any digging to find that, and it was straight away into that. A carpenter's charged X amount, and it's far too expensive. Can I get a handyman to do all this at like a quarter of the price?
Yeah.
And the carpenter had quoted £140 a day, which I think's staggeringly cheap.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, got to find someone who'll undercut them. And so you absolute. But they were buying all this like solid oak bifold doors and stuff that's not cheap.
Yeah.
And and then they were pleading like how little money they had, and
pleading poverty. I'm so short of money. I don't earn much.
I would still love someone charging £100 a day. If you charge £100 a day and you're listening to this show, please send us a note to tell us what your take home wages in a year.
Yeah, we'd love to know. No names mentioned, completely anonymous.
Please tell us if you're charging £100 a day or less and you're not employed by a company and you're not a subcontractor, so you're running your own business and you're charging less than £100 a day.
I mean, how would you even do that? £100 a day, £2,000 a month, £24,000 a year, let's say. You could only be doing that by using the family car, working from home completely with a bag of tools in the boot and a workmate.
If you say, what was it, £100 a day? So let's be really optimistic and say you do work 5 days a week, which you won't. But let's say you do 5 days a week. So that's 500 a week, and you're doing, say, 48 weeks a year. As you say, 24 grand a year. And that's not your take-home wage.
No, that's gross.
You then have to pay for the whole running of the business out of that. And for the best will in the world, you will not work 5 days a week. It's not possible. So let's say you work 4 days a week. So you're going to be working 80% of that. It's 0.8, so 19.2, and then knock off all your... You're going to be lucky if you're bringing in 15 grand a year. Lucky. In which case, that's pretty much what you'd make working full-time at McDonald's, I think.
I think you might be shocked at how little they earn at McDonald's, but it can't...
Well, I looked, and for over 21, I think it's about £8.50 an hour. So £8.50 an hour would be about 16 grand a year. So either way, you cannot be bringing in more than... The only way that you would be bringing in significantly more than 15 grand a year is if you're working like 60-hour weeks. And
yeah, in which case that's going to kill you.
It's going to... Yeah, it's not sustainable. That. So, but happy to be proven wrong, but I'd love
absolutely.
to know, what is your pre-tax profit, your yearly pre-tax profit that you're putting on your tax return if you charge less than £100 a day?
Yeah. Please
tell us. Please prove us wrong.
Please do. Fascinating.
So, yeah, we've got the second part of that video coming out on Saturday, where I'm touching on a few jobs that I get asked to do all the time, or I get asked, do I know anyone who does X, Y, Z? And that'll be quite an interesting one, because there's jobs out there now that no one's doing. And as a result, you could probably go out there and charge whatever you like, because there's no market to compare it against. Yeah, I was curious about what you were going to come up with. That I thought, what part of it might have been, well, you could start a YouTube channel. No, no, not if you want to make money. I mean, one of them is render maintenance on houses.
Oh right, yeah, sure, yeah.
Because every new build is getting built with white rendered walls, and it looks really nice for the first few years, and then after a few more years, it starts to turn green, and there's loads of houses around where I live that the render now looks horrific, and it needs to be properly cleaned and it needs to be properly repainted. And
right,
you know, you could set up a company just doing maintenance of render, and I'm sure there are companies out there doing it, but I haven't seen any advertising around where I live, and we are in a prime spot for it. You know, and you could go out there and charge, you know, say 400 quid a house, 500 quid a house, and if you could get that done in a day,
yeah,
you're probably looking easy 300 quid a day profit that you could make off that. I would have said, if you get all the materials and scaffolding and stuff like that. And anyway, that's
interesting.
That's one of them.
Yeah.
But I'll not spoil the surprise for you for Saturday.
No, please
What
don't.
else did we get on the handyman side? Oh yeah, that was and I got a note from someone saying about like pricing and people pricing to the extreme side of things. And someone was quoted to have a new boiler fitted, and the plumber came round and said, well, the fitting cost will be £1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought, well, fair enough. If I'm getting a new boiler fitted, I don't mind spending £1,000. And his next sentence was, it'll take about 6 hours.
Okay, good money.
So people saying that you should only charge £100 a day, and I know fitting boilers is highly skilled and you need to be certified and all that sort of thing, but they're charging £160 an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So do the math. Anyway, it is an interesting topic. I'm sure it'll come up time and time again. But lots of, I mean, the nice thing is that 99% of the comments to my video, because again, it was one of those videos that the comments could have gone either way.
Yeah.
And 99% of the comments, even from time-served craftsmen, have said, I 100% agree with what you're saying. There's the odd person saying, oh, no, you could never charge that. But 99% are saying...
you always get people saying, well, you can't charge that round here. You know, regardless of what you're actually asking. The people will always say that. I had, again, on the videos where I've talked about this, I had a couple of guys, one from New Zealand and one from Australia, who are now over here and working, and they've said exactly the same thing, that you know, the rates are too low. When there's a skills shortage, we should be putting prices up, not trying to compete to see who can do it cheapest.
And now is the time to do that.
Now's the time to do that. Absolutely.
Now, this is it. You know, if you've ever been waiting for a time to put your prices up,
yep,
this is it. We're in that time. There's a massive skill shortage at the minute.
Yeah.
Just because you can't find work, and maybe that's a business model thing and you need to look into how you're marketing yourself or presenting yourself or whatever. I can't explain that. That's too detailed to go into it in the podcast, because there's so many little factors that can have an influence on why work's not coming through the door.
Yes.
But on the whole, as I say, I'm not advertising at all, and I've now put a thing on my website saying please don't get in touch, because it was getting to the point where I just don't have time to reply to people, and I didn't want people sending replies and then me getting a bad name for not getting back to them. So now I've changed it so it more or less says I'm booked up for the whole of next year. If you want to send me a note, feel free to send us a note, and if something happens, you know, I get a cancellation or something, then I'll try and fit you in.
Yeah.
But please don't expect a response. And I'm still getting 2 or 3 messages a day from people just saying, I know you can't get back to us, but can you add us onto the list? And I'm not advertising anywhere. So
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Go figure.
I had a guy email me the other day to see if I could do. He's just moved to London from somewhere, and he's got sort of something that was a little piece of a table was lost in a move. And do I think could I make another one for him? He said, well, it's not really what I do. Or he's got a family heirloom plant tray that's got a broken corner that needs re-gluing back on. I said, well, look, it's not really what I do, but, you know, if you're local, I'm happy to have a quick look at it and see if it's something I can help you out with. I thought, you know, somebody just moved to the country, maybe to the city, maybe he wants, you know, other work doing, maybe like some nice fitted bookshelves or whatever else. Oh yeah, fantastic! Thanks so much. I'm in Bayswater. Well, Bayswater is about an hour away, so that's stretching the notion of local for me. I was thinking, well, if you're the other side of the park or something, or a couple of streets away, I'll consider it. And of course, I said, this. I got this email in. I was away last weekend visiting family, and I got this in while I was in the car. My wife was driving, so I just shot him a quick note back. So I'm away now. I'll get back to you next week. And he started chasing me on Wednesday. Oh, do you think you're going to be able to do this? Now, the guy obviously needs it doing, which is fair enough. But I just had to go back to him yesterday and say, look, no, I'm sorry. That doesn't constitute local, I'm afraid. Best of luck. Hope you can get it sorted. But as I said, in the first instance, it's really not for me. There you go. You got to disappoint some people sometimes. You're never going to be able to keep everybody happy.
But this is where the industry's ended up, though, isn't it? Because people have been charging so little for so long that so many good tradespeople have gone out of business, or they've gone off to just work contracting or subcontracting, where they can make substantially more money and not have to worry about being the person doing the quotes and running the business and everything else. You're just given the work on a plate, effectively. And it's like, well, why bother? And this is a situation we've ended up in where no one can find anyone to do the work now. And as I say, I do partially blame it on these ridiculous Mumsnet articles that come around, because people read those and think anyone who charges more than £100 a day is trying to rip them off. And it's like, oh, well, I'm only on £6.50 an hour, so therefore everyone else should only be on £6.50 an hour.
Well, maybe £8.50 if you're working at McDonald's. Let's be clear.
True.
Yeah, I know. It is a crazy sort of situation, really. The thing that's come up periodically with me is that you get somebody who says, well, my son-in-law does woodwork, and he says it shouldn't cost more than £75, to which you can only say, well, tell your son-in-law he's got the job, because I'm not doing it for that,
But that's fine if you're working as a subcontractor, and if you're working on a building site or something where, and even then I think you probably get a lot more than that, but like a day. But if you're not having to go out and do the business side of things. The business side of things takes an enormous amount of time, and I think this is what people just don't understand. That
I think the son-in-law in this scenario is somebody who mangles a bit of Conti board in the garage of a weekend,
right?
Rather than somebody who is actually in the business, in the trade. But
that's a glorified paid hobby, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't even think he was paid, but yeah. He probably sells copper futures or something and does does this for fun.
It's funny, it's interesting, but we just need to do like a select all and delete on every Mumsnet post on the internet. that would solve a lot of problems.
Very true. While we're talking about things that are awesome, let me tell you about this week's sponsor. This week's episode is sponsored once again by Ooznest. Ooznest. I used their V-Slot 2040 aluminium extrusion in a recent video, and Ooznest can supply from stock a wide range of shapes and sizes, all precision cut to your needs. Ooznest also has a huge stock of connectors and bearings, bolts and screws, mounts and brackets, shims and spacers, all the handy-dandy little bits and pieces that you might need for your next project. Now, with all this hardware to hand, you won't be shocked to learn that Ooznest are also deeply involved in CNC machining. They can supply you with anything from a handful of parts to a full CNC kit, with everything you need to get up and running. So if you've had your CNC interest tickled by all those YouTube videos, but are finding the process of discovering exactly what you need all a bit opaque, well, with a desktop kit starting at a lot less than you might think, you should definitely be paying Ooznest a visit. Ooznest is a young British company that ships worldwide, and if you order before 1 p.m, you'll have same-day dispatch from stock items. Better still, when you use the offer code MEASUREUP, all one word, MEASUREUP, at checkout, you'll receive a 5% discount off your first order. A 5% discount and same-day dispatch, what's not to like? Pay Ooznest a visit at ooznest.co.uk or use the links in the show notes or on our website. And we'd like to thank Ooznest for their support of this show.
What else are we chatting about today?
I wanted to bring up November. This is a thing that's been started by a guy on Twitter. I think it's PB Plumber. He's a plumber. There's a bit of a epidemic of thefts of tools from vans, and this guy's got a petition together to try and get it raised in Parliament, assuming we have a Parliament when the petition comes through. We've got until, I think it's May of next year. You've got to get 100,000 signatures on it. I think it's got 28,000 at the minute. And it's really, once you get 100,000 signatures on a petition, it has to be debated in Parliament. It has to be brought to Parliament's attention. And I think it was something that's probably worth supporting. I've never had my van hit. Have you?
Not 20 years ago, but not recently, no. Luckily, no.
But and again, everybody many people I'm sure listening to this are saying, well, you should empty your van every night. Well, I do that too, and I'm sure you do as well. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about guys who go to a job, to a work site, get what they need out of the van to do the job, and they're getting their vans hit while they're inside. This is a bit of an epidemic, and even guys on there's a TV show on British TV called DIY SOS. One of the guys who was working on that got his van done with everything that was going on. He got his tools nicked.
I've heard of some horrific things happening, like people hanging around the car parks of your builders merchants and DIY stores, literally waiting on people with vans to just go into the store and then.
Well, I've actually seen the opposite of that. Don't go there very often, but there's a Wickes store, which is a bit like a Lowe's or a Home Depot type place here in Britain, and pretty much every week there's a van parked in one corner with a bunch of dodgy looking blokes flogging tools for cash out the back of it. And I've reported this. I've called the police and said, look, this is happening, and they've said, how do you know there's a crime being committed? I said, well, I don't, but don't you think you should have a car around here, go and give them a tug and see what, I bet the van isn't taxed for starters. And if we've got somebody in the area, we'll see if we can send somebody by. They're only there for a couple of hours on a Wednesday morning or whatever else. But total disinterest. And one of the big problems is that if by some strange chance these guys do get caught, they're getting fined 50, 60 quid and a slap on the wrist. It's no deterrent at all. So if you can support this, it's probably a great thing. There's a link in the show notes to the petition to tackle tool theft, because stealing somebody's tools is pretty much the lowest form of theft. You're not just nicking something that somebody owns. You're stealing something that somebody uses to make their living from.
It's the lowest of the low, absolute lowest of the low.
Maybe you're insured and all that, but you've still got to deal with all that. You're going to lose your excess. You're going to deal with getting your van repaired. You won't get the full price of the tools back because those nice people at insurance companies will try and wriggle off the hook using any means they possibly can. So try and get on board with this. I've signed the petition. I'd encourage everybody else to do that as well. It's called November.com. If you go to that link, there's a link to the petition that you can sign, and we'll put a direct link to the petition that you can sign down in the I was going to say the video description note in the show notes of this week's episode.
Definitely get that done. And the other side as well is that when something like that happens, it's the amount of time that you're offline and you can't do any work.
Yeah.
Because you're having to sort the mess out. And, it could be a week or 2 weeks that, your vehicle might be away in the garage or
absolutely.
And especially mobile workers. And this is one of the reasons, probably my top reason why I'm not set up for mobile working, is that I would be so nervous about having.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the setups that people have in their vans, and it's amazing. I mean, literally like a portable workshop with full racks of shelving and parts and tools and track saw storage and
all that,
MFT,
even table saws and stuff as well. Absolutely.
And I would not be able to sleep at night with the way things are at the moment with this van theft epidemic that seems to be going on. I think it's absolutely shocking, and hopefully the November thing will go some way to getting this problem sorted out, because it's absolutely, well, it's just, as you say, it's the lowest of the low, isn't it?
It's not completely out of control, but it does seem to be a particular problem. Is it an epidemic? I don't know, but it's happening an awful lot to an awful lot of people, and let's try and get some actual deterrents in place to see if we can get this stopped. Yeah, so if you can, sign the petition. Costs you nothing. All it takes is a couple of minutes of your time. So follow the links in the video description and add your name to the 28,000 people who've already done this. And we'll see if we can get 100,000 people on this list by next year so we can get it debated in Parliament.
If we have a Parliament.
If indeed we have a Parliament, yes. Do we want to talk about, if we're not a news show.
There's a brief topic for the show. Well, I mean, I was thinking that maybe we should talk about it at some point, but it's such a giant topic. We don't have to, more just from a broad sense of what the hell is going on.
When we set up the podcast, we had sort of broad topics that we wanted to stay away from. We weren't going to talk specifically about our families. We're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about politics. We've stayed away from most of those, but yeah, we are here in Britain in a bit of flux, let's say.
Jeez, honestly, I mean, I can't. I'm just sick of hearing about it now. I must admit, it's so. If you don't live in the UK, all we hear about on the news now for the last 2.5 years or whatever it is Brexit. That's all that gets talked about, and it's to the point where people just don't care anymore. And you know, it's such a shambles. It's beyond belief.
It is. We're recording this the morning after a supposed agreement in principle has been reached with the EU to negotiate Britain's exit out of the EU. And overnight, half a dozen ministers have resigned. The Prime Minister, Mrs May, was questioned extensively in Parliament yesterday for hours and very aggressively. And just I don't get a newspaper, but going through the newspaper headlines and looking at the foreign newspaper headlines, apparently Britain is in disarray, and yet here we are. Everybody else is carrying on as normal to the best of our abilities.
I mean, I just don't. I had someone reply in the comments to the handyman video where I had said, yes, I think it's a great time to set up in business because there's loads of work out there. And someone replied saying, well, I wouldn't set up in business at the minute until Brexit is out the road. I hate to tell you this, but you're going to be retired before this gets sorted out. This isn't going to be sorted by March next year. No way. No way. It's an absolute mess.
And regardless of the state of the relationship between Britain and the EU and the US, come to that, the people who live here will still need bits of furniture making. They still need repairs doing. They will still need a bookcase or a set of shelves or an alcove unit or whatever it is. Those needs don't go away.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. Thank you. Yes, those are the words I was struggling for.
Life goes on. And would you care, without kind of giving an indication of political sway either way, would you care to take a guess of what you think's going to happen?
Goodness me.
Where do you think we will be in 6 months' time?
Honestly, I haven't got no idea. I'm pretty sure we will have severed relationships with the EU. Whether that's with an agreement or without, I don't know. But I think whatever tenuous links we have currently, I think will be gone. Whether that's with an agreement or not, I just don't know. Couldn't tell you. Wouldn't want to guess.
I don't think anything's going to happen.
Do you not?
That's my gut feeling at the minute. I don't see how they can fix the mess of where they've got to now. And May, without giving any, whether you're pro May or against May, she's had the poison chalice of having to deal with this.
I mean,
I don't think she'll make it through.
Oh no, she's gone. She's history.
She's gone, and when she goes, there'll have to be a re-election, and then goodness knows what will happen from that. It wouldn't surprise us if there's another vote on the back of all that, and then what question would you even ask in the vote? It's so. I think they'll either just drag on for years, or the whole thing will just get knocked on the head. That's my gut feeling at the minute, because it's turned into such a mess.
Yeah. I have no feelings either for Mrs. May, the Prime Minister. No feelings either way.
I feel sorry for her in that.
I feel sorry for her. Yeah.
Position.
On the other hand, she took on the poison chalice of Brexit, and it was never going to be anything other than an unholy mess. Ever since Dave, Mr. Cameron resigned, he picked up his ball and went home when the vote didn't go his way. I'm not a fan of former Prime Minister Tony Blair, but give the guy his due. he never asked the question until he wouldn't ask the question until he was sure which way the vote was going to go. And Dave made a huge mistake, huge screw up, asking that question when he did. And again, flouncing off with his ball to live in the Cotswolds in his little hut when he did as well. Apparently, he's supposed to be making a comeback.
Really? Can he go out in public?
I don't think he could. I think he's a goner as well.
That's. I didn't know he was trying to make some sort of comeback.
So I've read.
Right.
So I've read. He's putting out feelers to see how the land lies. I think the land may well be a minefield.
Oh, I think he just needs to stay hidden away. I think he's probably one of the most unpopular people in the country on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, it'll be interesting to look back. I think it's interesting to touch on stuff like this every now and again. Just
every now and then. I say, well,
historic purposes, because at some point in 6 months' time, you're going to have people listening to this episode for the first ever time.
Yeah.
And it'll be so interesting. If nothing else, people are a bit more attuned to politics than they have ever been, to the point of not wanting to know anything more about politics.
Yes.
I think it's just confirmed people's disbelief in the systems, and anyway, there you go.
Yeah.
There's a topic. There's a topic
for another day in another podcast, possibly.
Yeah, it would be just. Well, I don't even know. No, I can't even go there. It's. I don't know how they can fix it. I just don't get it. I don't understand what can be done. And I've seen arguments on like the Labour side, and I don't think any of those would particularly fix the problems either. I don't. I'm generally the kind of person who I don't like to come up with a problem without also having an idea of what the solution would be. But in this case, I don't know what the solution would be.
Out of interest, I haven't seen. Does anybody know what the actual agreement is? We've heard that an agreement has been reached, and everybody's talking about the fact that it's been reached, but I don't actually know what it is. Nobody's actually said, and this is the agreement. This is what we've hammered out so far.
Not really, because it's this 500-odd page document that got submitted to Parliament.
Yeah, well, okay, will somebody praise it for us then, so we can have an inkling?
I mean, my only
rather than all these clever politicians.
Understanding is that it keeps us in some weird customs union while not being in the EU, but I don't really understand the full extent of how that affects me. and it doesn't sound like a very good thing. So, but it more so because I don't understand what it means.
Welcome to the club.
I understand what it means to be in a single customs union, but I don't understand how you can be in a single customs union without also being part of the club, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a really, really bad position to be in, from what I can understand. So, but I don't understand it. So no, I'm with you. I don't get it. I don't understand.
Moving on, but in the same theme, have you ever broken or damaged anything valuable?
On a customer side?
Yes. Not a whole country or anything, just...
Not a whole country. I don't think I have. I need to get my thinking cap on there. I don't think I have. Have you?
Let me tell you my chandelier story.
All right. Oh.
It was an absolute classic Fools and Horses moment. It was, I used to do, back in the handyman days, when I was starting to transition, if you like, into doing a bit more sort of carpentry type stuff, through somebody I knew, I was recommended to this family, and they're kind of sort of part-time property developers, quite wealthy. They bought a house for a lot of money, spent $500,000 on the refurb in a fancy part of London. And there were just a few little bits and pieces that they needed doing, but they're very particular. They know exactly what they want. And they had matching crystal chandeliers up in the bedrooms. And I can't remember what I was doing. I don't know. They didn't want them taking down, or they wanted them taking down for cleaning. That was it. And obviously it's over a bed. And they had some other guys there do some painting, and purely by chance they'd left a dust sheet over the bed. And I was up on a set of steps, and I was just I was trying to figure out how the thing came down. And these are crystal; they're big, heavy things. And I could see what was happening. And I'd taken the rose off, and I'd removed that, pull that down. I was just looking at it, and the whole thing just sheared. It just snapped off. Timing was just, and it just went. And one of those things where you look at it and think, I should probably try and catch. No, I'm not going to try and catch that because that'd take my arm off. It was a big piece, and it's a lovely big old house, high ceilings and everything. And this thing went down with such a crash. It was just waiting for somebody to move the rose, basically, and then it would just went off. So it wasn't, technically my fault, and yet, my impact of being there and fiddling with it definitely accelerated the fracture. But the little hooky thing that it was attached to just sheared. Just literally came apart and it went down with such a crash. And then there's that terrible sort of silence afterwards, and you can hear from downstairs, big house, basement, and I was right up at the top, and you can hear sets of footsteps hurrying all the way up the stairs. Are you all right?
Oh, yes. Lordy.
Bit of a problem.
I gather you were okay.
Oh, I was fine, yeah.
It didn't hit you on the way down. And what were the customer all right? Did they understand it wasn't your fault? I said,
look, I'm so sorry, but this piece just snapped and I could show them. Right, she said, right, okay. Well, it's not there, so obviously it's broken. What we'll do, we'll get onto the insurer straight away, she said.
Wow.
Ah, dear.
It's those times where you're just praying you've got an understanding customer and a reasonable customer.
Yeah, they were fine about it, thankfully.
And not someone who's going to instantly just start trying to play the blame game. And
yeah, that was one time when I thought, oh, I hope my public liability is up to date. Yeah, but that's just about the only thing that's happened to me in a customer's home.
Wow, I need to give it some thought. I'm sure there must be stuff. Because I keep photographs of every job that I've done. I need to go through. I've probably blacked it out if
it was a bad one.
If it was something really bad, I've probably intentionally forgotten about it. I mean, there's plenty little things, but that's just part of the job. Where you get frustrated and have a little break, and you come back to it the next day, and it's like, oh, well, why didn't I just do this? But that's just par for the course. But not on a customer site. I mean, way back in the day on one of my own house renovations, I drilled through a gas pipe, but that was relatively easy to sort out in the scheme of things. It didn't cause any problems. Emergency gas man turned up and fixed it, but it was a pipe in a completely unsuspected place at the edge of a floorboard. Not in the middle of a floorboard, and it was where a screw had been, and it basically, put a new screw in the board and it went straight through the pipe. I hadn't had the board up. It was my own stupid fault, naivety for not checking under the board first. And there was a reason why there wasn't a screw in that hole. Someone had put a gas pipe under it.
Yes. I mean, there's a whole host of little things that have gone on over the years. I did put a drill through a heating pipe at one time.
Heating's a nasty one.
They leak. What do you know?
Do you follow Plumber Parts on YouTube at all?
No, I haven't seen him.
Plumber Parts, James. Anyway, great channel, all about plumbing stuff. It's quite entertaining. And he put up a video not that long ago about the worst ever disaster he had. I'll not tell you about it.
I'll have to go and have a look.
But it's heating related. And we'll include a link in the show notes. And
great.
All you can do is listen and think, oh no. And you hear each part of the story unfolding that's like, oh no. And and it doesn't get much worse than that. And anyway.
How are you at losing and misplacing stuff? And then finding it again?
I heard that I heard about your router pit. It wasn't the one in our back garden then.
No, it wasn't the one in your back garden. I lost a router grooving bit. I was all set to do my doors, and I couldn't find the bit. It was just nowhere to be seen. It was in none of the usual places. And then I came to pick up a router this week, and blow me the grooving. I bought another one to do the doors, and Wilden Tool do a great job, get it to you next day. And I did all that. And then I picked up a big handheld router to do something this week. And there was my grooving bit in the router. Now, I've never, ever used that handheld. I use a big 60mm grooving bit, 1/4 inch depth, 60mm wide. It's not the sort of bit you're going to swing handheld. Or if you did, you'd know about it. So I've never used it. I've no idea what it's doing. It was actually in the collet, good and tight, so it's obviously been put in with a spanner, and I've just got no recollection of it at all.
It's funny.
I must have done it because nobody else has access to the workshop. But it's just a complete blank.
I mean, sometimes when you're on autopilot, and especially if I end up on the phone, I'm a wanderer when I'm on the phone.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be wandering around and I'll start pottering, doing things while I'm chatting to people, and I'll end up that's my worst possible time for when things get misplaced, because I will do things completely subconsciously while just chatting away to people.
The worst things for me is I've got a neighbour, Jonathan, who is the unit next door but one to me. He's a precision engineer. He's made all kinds of handy little metalwork bits and pieces for me. In return, he can help himself to all the bits of scrap that I have lying around. He regularly knocks on my door, and when he does, I almost always have something in my hand that I put down to go and deal with him. And it's somewhere. It's somewhere, but I don't know where I put it. He came in one time when I was cleaning, after my Graco died. I did all the spraying with a little HVLP sprayer, and I was just cleaning the nozzle, and I'd taken the end off to clean it up properly. And he knocked on my door. I put it down, and it was gone. And of course, I can't carry on spraying because that's the bit you need. So where is it? What do you know? And eventually, I found it under a piece of tissue that I happened to have in my hand while I was cleaning it. But it was, for a good 15, 20 minutes, it was getting almost panicky because I needed to get on with this. I already had one sprayer go down. I couldn't afford to lose a crucial part of another one. And it turned up eventually. But my grooving bit has come back. So now I've got a spare, which is really good. But I need to make sure I know where they are.
It'll be interesting. You'll have to try and track back how that ended up in your router.
I just have no recollection of it because it's not. It was a router that was out. but it's not one I use with that bit. I've never used it with that bit. I don't know why I would put it there.
Was it something where you thought, you've got a router table, haven't you?
Yeah.
So was it something where you thought, oh, the router table's covered up, I'll do it by hand, and you've put it in, and then you've thought against it?
No, I would never do that. I'd never use it handheld. It's just and it's one of those things that would never leave the workshop. So I knew it was in there somewhere, but I had no idea why. And some fool had obviously put it in a router and tightened the collet up, and then put the router down so you couldn't see it. Of course, because it's a grooving bit, it's flat, and it was flushed up against the dust collection cover, so it wasn't immediately obvious. I wouldn't normally see it.
Funny. I still think it's utterly bizarre that on the day that we were talking about this, our poor hamster died a couple of weeks ago. Little Cookie the hamster, but he'd had a good innings. You know, he was the oldest hamster I've ever known of.
Oh, bless!
And so obviously, you know, young daughter and son, and we had to do the whole
little funeral march. Yeah.
Funeral and ceremonial burial in the back garden for little Cookie.
Yeah.
And I was digging the hole, and this was literally on the Friday afternoon after we'd recorded the podcast where you told me about this missing router bit. I'm digging the hole, and that's a grooving bit out of a router. It was in
your garden. That in the bizarre.
Garden.
Definitely not mine.
In Cookie's grave.
That's a very precise grave then, if you're using it cutting it with a router.
And so very bizarre, and that looks like it's been underground for, you know, a long time, and you'll see there's a picture of it on my Instagram.
Yeah.
And but it was on the afternoon that we just chatted about it. I was like, what's the chances? Anyway, we're best wrap it up. We've been chatting for ages.
I think we've better had. We've been rapiding on for quite long enough. Talking of Instagram, I'm on Instagram at 10 Minute Workshop. What's your handle on Instagram, Andy?
At Gosforth Handyman on Instagram and at Gosforth Andy on Twitter.
I'm at 10 Minute Shop on Twitter. Those are both good ways of getting hold of us individually. We do, of course, have a show Twitter and show Instagram. It's at Measuring Up PC on Twitter and at Measuring Up Podcast on Instagram. Of course, you can also email us at the show here, contact at measuringuppodcast.com.
And I'm going to add a contact form onto the Measuring Up podcast website, so because I know a lot of people forget what the email address is, so if you just go to measuringuppodcast.com, hopefully by the time this show's out there'll be a little contact button and you can just fill in the form on there if you want to get in touch, and then you don't have to remember the email address.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. We've got to be careful with our email address when we give it out. We don't really want it going on the website or in the show notes, because they get reproduced so many times, and we want to preserve that email address, because obviously it would be a bit of a disaster if that email address got spammed to death and then we had to change it, because we've been talking about that email address on all the podcasts to date.
So hopefully we can keep it. We'll see in 100 shows' time if it still exists.
100 shows' time. Let's see where we get to.
A massive thank you to all of our Patreon supporters as well. Interestingly, we've only got 3 slots left now on our shoutouts, Patreon shoutouts.
That's amazing.
Thing on Patreon, which is fantastic. So if you do want to shout out on the show, there's only 3 more slots remaining at that at the moment. But a massive thank you to Douglas Steele, This'll Do, Brendan at the Shades Workshop, Tim Bowers, Nick Fajardo, Adrian Millington, Chris Davison, Paul Gardner, Eddie Carroll, James Hewitt, Carl Poutney at the Strawbite Workshop, Steve Avery, Peter Tone, Owen Bullock, Tony Carnell, Adam Padley, Chris Mark Duthie and Max Vietz.
Also Mark Duff, Ben Harker, Harry Capper, John T. Lynch, Duncan, Chris Stokesmore, Ben Campbell from the Colonel Collective, Jason Williams, Wilson Chan, Kevin Steer, Dominique Kujinskin, Andy Farmer, Randall Davis, David Chisnell, Kevin Miller, Piece of Timber, P-E-A-C-E, very clever, Jim Hooper and Andrew Marnell.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for helping us keep the lights on this show. Remember, you can go to patreon.com/measuringuppodcast if you want to help support the show. That would be massively appreciated.
Talking of which, we need to get on with the after show, don't we? So I think we'll wrap it up for today and just say thank you very much for listening. Always a pleasure to have had the pleasure of your company, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.
See you in a couple of weeks.